This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
OPEC Plus is unlikely to make any oil output policy changes until a full ministerial gathering in June. 3 OPEC Plus sources told Reuters ahead of next week's gathering of ministers that is not expected to make any policy recommendations. The OPEC and allies led by Russia, known as OPEC Plus, will hold an online joint ministerial monitoring committee meeting on April 3 to review the market and members' implementation of output cuts. The sources, who asked not to be named because they were not authorized to speak publicly, said they did not expect action until June and the April meeting could be swift and straightforward.
Oil prices fell for a second day on Wednesday after a report that crude stockpiles in the US, the world's biggest oil user, surged, and on signs major producers are unlikely to change their output policy at a technical meeting next week. Brent crude futures for May dropped 74 cents, or 0.9%, to $85.51 a barrel at 0420 GMT. The May contract is set to expire on Thursday, and the more actively traded June contract declined 68 cents, or 0.8%, at $84.95. U.S. West Texas Intermediate, WTI, crude futures for May delivery fell 64 cents, or 0.8%, at $80.98.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
The shipping industry is under increasing pressure to decarbonize, but unclear regulatory guidelines, including around what sorts of cleaner fuels large vessels should run, is complicating that path to net zero, according to executives. Global shipping firms are looking for ways to lower their carbon footprints, particularly as the International Maritime Organization, IMO, which regulates the global shipping industry, is being pushed to implement a charge on the sector's greenhouse gas emissions. The IMO's Maritime Environment Protection Committee concluded its 81st meeting last week, and participants agreed on a possible draft outline of an IMO net zero framework.
The United States and South Korea this week launched a new task force aimed at preventing North Korea from procuring illicit oil, as deadlock at the United Nations Security Council casts doubts over the future of international sanctions. The first meeting of the Enhanced Disruption Task Force was held in Washington on Tuesday. The meeting involved more than 30 officials from ministries and agencies in charge of diplomacy, intelligence, sanctions, and maritime interdiction, South Korea's foreign ministry said in a statement. Next, we have the top news in metal markets. China's net gold imports via Hong Kong slumped about 48% in February to the lowest level since November, data showed on Tuesday. Net imports stood at 39.826 metric tons in February and were down from 76.248 tons in January, according to data from the Hong Kong Census and Statistics Department. Total gold imports via Hong Kong, which include re-exports, were down about 45% at 45.297 tons.
A World Trade Organization, WTO, panel has found that duties imposed by Australia in a steel products dispute with China were flawed, a ruling that Canberra said it accepted. China launched the complaint in June 2021 during a period of intense bilateral political and trade tensions over anti-dumping and anti-subsidy measures on railway wheels, wind towers, and stainless steel sinks. In all three categories, the WTO said Australia's investigating authority, the Anti-Dumping Commission, ADC, had acted inconsistently with some articles of its rules. Australian Trade Minister Don Farrell said in a statement that the panel had found some technical issues with how the duties were calculated.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
Indonesia's domestic rice supply-demand gap is seen at a surplus of 1.7 million metric tons in the first half of 2024, narrowing from 3.36 million ton surplus last year, an agriculture ministry official said on Wednesday. Drought driven by El Niño hit Indonesia in the second half of 2023, delaying the planting season and hurting harvests, resulting in rice deficit in January and February. Total rice output between January and June is seen at 17.09 million tons, more than the 15.39 million tons total demand predicted for the period. That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.